Hi, Sandra. Welcome to another episode of Asexualise, my asexual life. This is a place to be for education about asexuality, so subscribe and hit that bell icon right now. Happy Asexual Perspectives Awareness Month, day 11 we're on. This is to celebrate our diversity across the asexual spectrum and our differences within it. So asexuality is a sexual orientation that's largely based on a lack of sexual attraction. You have the pure asexuals that don't experience any sexual attraction whatsoever, and the grey asexuals that do experience sexual attraction. Either they experience it but not enough to want to act on it, or they experience it only in limited, rare, or specific circumstances, so they lack the usual sexual attraction. And asexuality is a spectrum with lots of different subcategories of identities within it. And some asexuals are really sex repulsed. So this can make it very difficult to live with someone, for example, especially if there's people in the household that are talking about sex, interest in sex, very energized around sex, if you understand what I mean. And some asexuals, really like their own space. They're introverts, they're loners, they just not interested in having other people in their space. But other asexuals, they have this kind of like community vibe that they want, this sense of camaraderie and companionship. So what do asexuals really think of living together and living with other people? Do they like it or do they feel uncomfortable? This is what we're going to be discussing tonight in Asexual Perspectives Awareness, day 11. Let's crack on with reading from Asexual Perspectives book, 47 Asexual Stories. Just like the book, this is a special month to celebrate our diversity across the asexual spectrum, our differences within it. If you haven't yet got yourself a copy of this book, what are you waiting for? Go now to Amazon, go and grab a copy, keep this tab open. I'll still be talking to you while you're buying a copy. Go and get it. You can also order it on Waterstones, Barnes & Noble website, Blackwell's, and even Walmart. So go for it. So let's crack on with tonight's show, or today or this morning, wherever you're tuning in from. It's lovely to see you, as always. And we're going to ask Kenneth Williams, what's your view on living with someone? Live with whoever. I've lived with whoever. I'd move in with a partner, but only if I truly felt we were compatible, for no other reason than I don't want to suddenly have bills I cannot afford myself. I don't care if people who are dating move in together. I think it's a good idea for people to live together before marriage. What if you learn you cannot live with them? They drive you crazy, or it's just because it just causes too many issues. So I think that's a very good, important point that Kenneth makes. I definitely personally agree with living together before marriage, because I do agree that what if you can't live with them? And like Kenneth says, they drive you crazy, it just causes too many issues. I personally have lived with guys in the past, and it was so stressful and anxiety inducing. It was a nightmare, to be honest. I'm much more happier living on my own and being responsible for my own bills, my own food, and everything like that. I don't like sharing responsibilities. I'm the opposite of wanting to share bills. I don't want to share bills. I like to be totally reliant on myself for that, for my rent, for my bills, for what I pay out. I have a tight, strict budget with myself. I like to be in total control of my life in that way. And it used to drive me nuts when I lived with an ex, and he used to spend a load of money on flashy clothes, the latest video games, and looking the part. But when it came to my health and the fact that I needed a decent bed to sleep on because it hurt me, he wasn't interested. He wasn't interested in putting curtains up properly. They just used to be like kind of hanging off the pole or whatever, rail. I think it was a rail. And he wouldn't even put that back. He was not interested in anything that benefited my health. but he was all interested in appearances, the way he looked and everything like that. The priorities were totally wrong, and I didn't like that about him. There's a lot of things I didn't like about him because he wasn't good in the end in many ways. Sexually, he was good, but everything else he was not good. Apart from, I did like kissing him and stuff like that, but it wasn't a good relationship. It wasn't a healthy relationship. And it was only when I moved in with him, well, he moved in with me, should I say, that things really became bad. When we lived separately, it was actually much better. And in the end, we ended up living separately as well, but still was together for quite a long time. I'm talking years here. So I personally have not had good experiences living with other people. I don't like sharing facilities. You know, I've been in house shares years ago, and I had to share like a toilet or a shower or kitchen, all of which is really bad. Actually, I think I've always had my own shower, but I've had to share a toilet and kitchen with lots of other people. And it's just horrible. Particularly a kitchen, you know. You used to get people and they used to put, some people used to put money, because instead of a key meter, it was like a coin meter, where I used to live in shared houses before. And when they would put the coins in, right, the people who were eating downstairs in the kitchen, for example, cooking, would put coins in. And then when they didn't want to cook anymore, they would not bother putting any more money in, because it's like they're not using it anymore. And so it used to be for periods of time when no one was cooking, that the electricity used to go off in the kitchen, which meant all your food was getting spoiled, especially if it was in the freezer. And it was like, people are like, I'm not putting money in unless I'm using the kitchen. When I'm using the kitchen, I'll put money in. Otherwise, I'm not going to. And so you ended up having a kitchen which wasn't lit most of the time, and the food going off in the fridge freezer. It's just awful. I personally hated living in, excuse me, shared accommodation like that. So that's my personal stance and view. And I definitely think it's a good idea to live together before marriage. I know many religions don't agree with that, but I personally totally agree with that. I think you should have sex before marriage as well, if you're going to have sex, because you might be highly sexually incompatible, and you don't want that to happen. And if you're asexual who's sex positive or going to have sex in any way, shape, or form, you need to know that before you get married to the person, especially if this person is going, oh, I won't have sex with you after marriage. But is it still going to be like that? Do you trust the person enough? Ask yourself these questions. And so, yeah, bear this in mind. It's really important. So, what's your view on living with someone, D? I love living with people, but my experience so far has been roommates and family. I'll probably want to live with a romantic partner if I like them a lot, but it's hard for me to imagine not having my own bed or bedroom. At the very least, I think I would need some space in the house/apartment that was unambiguously mine. I think that might have to do more with my personality than with asexuality. I think personally that I don't want to live with anyone, right? Because I prefer to live on my own. But if I was living with someone, which I can't see me doing ever, but if I did, I would, in the same flat as them or house, I would like to have my own separate room with ensuite, or ideally have two completely separate flats within the same building next door to each other. That would be much better, with my own kitchen, my own facility, so they can go back to their place and do what they like, and I can go to my place. And it would be like we lived next door to each other. I think that would probably be the absolute best, that we live next door to each other. So we always have our own space, our own place, pay our own bills, do our own cooking, and then we can just see each other for the fun times, and the times when we get sick because we're living next door to each other and we can help each other out and stuff like that. I think that would be my ideal scenario if I was to live with anyone. I do like actually living in a house with other flats. So I currently living in Masonette, which is really nice. It's 2 floors, right? I feel very lucky and blessed to live. It's rented, but I feel very lucky and blessed to live in accommodation that's on 2 floors, and I think it's quite good in the sense that if I want to work at my kitchen table or my office downstairs, it kind of cuts that off from my bedroom upstairs, although I still spend quite a lot of time in my bedroom doing my work on my laptop because I just love that. But I quite like it. The downside is the stairs, because I do have fibromyalgia. I have 2 broken bones in my back at the moment, and that's hard going, you know, and it's up the top. I live in the top floor, the very top of the roof. So that is really hard as well. And I do like, though, having people in the house. So I live in a house. This is one masonette. There's 3 other masonettes. And I do like the fact that you've got a bit of sense of security with other people around you, you know? Like if I go away on holiday, it's not like the house has got no one in it. The actual house itself has got other people downstairs in other flats. There's always someone here. There's never a time that I've ever known of everyone being on holiday or away at the same time. So I think there's a lot more security and safety in that. There is some security and safety in having other people around, but all completely independent and hardly ever see each other. So I do like that setup. I do like the fact there's other homes in the house. Does that make sense? And even in my last place I lived in, there was other rooms in the house. I had my own flat in the middle of the house, a guy had a flat upstairs, and then the other people had the rest of the house on 2 levels. The good thing about where I live now is it's more kind of secluded where I live now. So yeah, I think there's pros and cons to it, but I do actually like the fact I've got people around me, and the people that live here now, they all seem like really nice, decent people. When I first lived here, there was a couple that lived downstairs. Oh my God, they were having a abusive relationship, and they were like shouting at each other out in the streets for like 4 or 5 hours one night. And they used to shout downstairs. It was awful. It was just like you were in the room with them and being traumatized. So that's what I hated about it. But now there's a girl and her mum that lived there. There's a guy that lives next door to me. As far as I know, that's how they identify in gender, but I haven't actually asked them, so maybe I shouldn't just assume that. But there are some really nice people, you know. They all are very good people as far as I know. They don't have dodgy people around. They seem, just living their life, and I think that's a good thing. So yeah, I feel a lot safer here now, a lot more secure, a lot more happy, feeling good. I'm allowed, I've got all my own furniture here as well, so I like that. Right, so Jamie James, what's Jamie James's view on living with someone? If you'd asked me that when I was 19, it was my escape. And when I moved in with my partner, I was comfortable with him. Nowadays, I'm more reluctant on trust. So yeah, I think if you've had a bad relationship in the past with an ex-partner, then it can make you more reluctant to trust living with someone ever again. And it is horrible if you end up living with someone who turns out to be a narcissist or abuser, because you're very financially tied to that person then. And I would say that's a huge warning sign never to do it. The good thing about this place is I am on a contract for just a single person here, a single tenant. I can't have someone else live with me. It would be breaking my contract, so I'm not allowed that, which I'm really happy about. So I like living on my own. I find it so less stressful, so better. But I do miss sometimes having someone around to talk to, that is a benefit of living with someone. You should have someone to talk to. L. Hardwick's story. What's your view on living with someone? Probably a little different from some others. I love living with someone, but it doesn't have to be romantic. I prefer living with friends. So yeah, for me personally, I like to have my own space, my own place. I love having my own facilities. I don't want to share a toilet or a shower. I like having my own kitchen because sometimes I just don't do washing up for days because I have got a chronic pain condition that affects the nerves and muscles of my body, which is fibromyalgia. And at the moment, when I've got a bad back, broken back, 2 broken bones in my back, I can't do as much housework as I would usually do. And so for me to not have someone on my back going, oh, you haven't done that yet, or feeling guilty that I haven't done stuff. Because I do feel guilty sometimes, but then I'm like, when I live on my own, it's like you don't really need to feel guilty because there's just you. And you understand you, Sandra. Do you know what I mean? So that's the best thing, to be understanding with yourself and compassionate and kind. So Jen Mullen's story, Asexual Perspectives. What's your view of living with someone? I would be perfectly happy to live with my best friend my entire life, though I'm afraid it won't happen. He will probably end up married, but in truth, I would be okay marrying him and living with him. Not because of romance, but because we care about each other a lot, and being married might be more financially beneficial. So, yeah, I mean, this person says not because of romance, but I have a question mark about that. But they would know better than anyone else, right? So, yeah, I know some people do like to get married because they think it's better financially, but if that marriage turns into be a terrible, if that marriage turns out to be a terrible thing, a bad connection, the person changes down the line, they change their mind, they change their personality, something happens to change the situation, then you can end up financially tying yourself into a contract with someone that you can't get out of for like 5 years or more. And it's just awful. I would highly not recommend it. And personally, if I was getting married, which I'm not, I'd only want to get married for romantic reasons. As in that I love the person. Well, I shouldn't say romantic reasons because you feel romantic feelings without loving someone. So I would only get married for love, not for financial gain, basically. And I wouldn't see getting married as financial gain. Actually, I'd probably see it the opposite. That this guy is going to, like, if you have to share household bills, for example, and the guy eats more than you do, could be any gender, but guys tend to need more calories than women. And if the guy eats more than I do, it's like, and you're sharing household bills, it means that you're still paying more for him because he eats more, right? In theory. And so it's just like awful. And if you've got a job which doesn't pay that well, but the other person's got a job that pays amazingly, but you're splitting the bills 50-50, but yet they're eating more food and costing more money, it's really unfair. And it's just not good, in my opinion. I don't like it. I don't like sharing household bills. I don't like being financially tied to a guy. I like my own space and my own place. Right. Henry's story. I would need to be with a person with a very, very specific personality for me to actually want to live with them. The only real scenario I can imagine in which I live with someone is if I need financial help paying for an apartment or something down the line. Yeah, I understand that students often live with each other because they find it cheaper and more beneficial to, share houses and just have a room. I think it's very awkward if you're in a relationship with someone who is a student, for example, in student accommodation, or living with someone else. Maybe they're not even a student, but they're like living in a shared house with just a room. I think there's such a lack of privacy in that scenario. It's not good. I've been speaking to guys in the past that have got other guys living in the same room as them and can hear everything I'm talking about. There's no privacy, which is like a violation, really, of privacy. Do you know what I mean? So Isadora's story. What's your view on living with someone? I feel that if that works for people, they should do it. Like any relationship, they need to make sure that communication is there and be honest with each other. And yeah, that's really important. If you're going to live with someone, you need to be perfectly clear about boundaries, about what's acceptable behavior, what isn't, and also how you feel about living with someone if you're not used to it, and how often you're going to spend time together, and who's going to like have what TV and what space. Are you going to have your own space in the home? I think the scenarios, personally, the scenarios if you want to live with someone, but you don't want to share a bed with someone, because some asexuals don't, and I find it hard to sleep next to a guy when I've got fibromyalgia. It's really difficult for me on my pressure points, and I get self-conscious anyway. I can't usually sleep next to someone. So it means I barely get any sleep. So I think the solution to that is, if you're going to live with someone, to have separate rooms so that you've always got your own bed and things like that. You've always got your own space. And then if you want to cuddle up with each other and go to sleep with each other in one of the other person's bed, that's fine. But if you can't sleep, you can go back to your own room and just go there to sleep. I think it's just so much better to have that extra room instead of one, you have two. The other scenario is, you have a room each, but you also have an ensuite, or you have two like rooms with ensuite and maybe kitchenette in the same home. So maybe you share a lounge, but you still have like your own studio flats. On the other scenario, as you have two different flats completely with two different doors, like sectioning them off. You could have two adjacent flats where you have a door that leads into each other's flat, or you could just, some people have that. Sometimes it's in hotels with family rooms where there's actually a door built into the wall. Or you could have just two completely separate flats next door to each other. I prefer the idea personally of two flats next door to each other in my ideal scenario, because like I said in the beginning of this video, you then can pay your own bills. You've got your own place, your own space, your own kitchen, your own living quarters, your own ensuite and everything. And then if something goes wrong, it's hell because you're still living next to them, which is not good, but it's better than being financially tied to that person forever. And it's better in terms of looking after yourself, because you can do what you want when you want. Like, I personally don't like someone having people just come into my home without me knowing about it. So I think it's better to live separately from that point of view as well. So if a guy wants to have his mates around and do whatever with them, that's fine in his own place. But if I was living with a guy, I find it very difficult if, say, for example, I went out and then all of a sudden I come back and his mates are sprawled there with beers or whatever, watching the TV. To me, it's like invading my personal space. And say I just want to come home and relax on the bed or do some writing or something. It's like but there's guys all over the place with beer cans or whatever. It just feels uncomfortable. And I don't like it. It feels a complete invasion of space, really intrusive. I don't like people coming round to my home when I don't know they're coming around. I know that's kind of weird probably because years ago people would just drop round each other's houses like neighbours, but I always like to schedule things. I don't like people just turning up when they feel like it, especially because I might not be dressed. I might still be working in my pajamas or something. I just find it totally inappropriate, I prefer to know if someone's coming, then I can prepare myself. So I think that's important. Anne's story. What's your view of living with someone, Anne? Preferably married if it was someone I was in a relationship with. I would hope to get enough time on my own before deciding to try to make it work with living with someone. I intend. Oh, I'll say that bit again from the beginning. Preferably married if it was someone I was in a relationship with. I would hope to get enough time on my own before deciding to try to make it work with living with someone I intend to share the rest of my life with. So yeah, and I think some people do feel like that. They feel like they only want to live with someone if they marry them. And that might be old-fashioned, but it's also kind of romantic, I guess, and it's what some people want due to their religion, their beliefs, and oh, hello, nice to see you in chat. And so, it's to do with their beliefs, their religion, their values, and everyone's is valid, 5 Mark 2 end story, asexual perspectives. What's your view on living with someone? For myself, I think it would be possible to live with someone, regardless of their sexual orientation, as long as we consider each other's feelings and such on sex. So yeah, I mean, I've been in heterosexual relationships for a lot of my life. So if I was living with someone, which I can't see me ever doing, but if I was, if it was a heterosexual that was good about my boundaries, didn't overstep them, that I felt comfortable being around physically, then it wouldn't matter if they were heterosexual, if you know what I mean. But I personally like to keep covered up. I don't like to show my body. And that's quite hard to keep that up forever if you live with the person and never show your body, because you've got to be covered up all the time. Whereas when I'm on my own, I'm just naked after the shower, you know? Well, I got towels around me and then I dry myself off, but you know what I mean? It's just like I can do what I like when I live on my own and freedom in that way. But I do not like showing my body to guys at all. And yeah, so that would be another difficulty living with someone. I'm nudity to repulsed and I don't want to see a guy's dingly dangly thing either, you know? I have to look the other way if that happens, you know? It's like I'm really not into that, which loads of women are like drooling over, and I'm like, what is going on? And that's because I'm not into sex, you know? And I don't need genitalia. I don't think it looks particularly pleasant. Right. So, Waywalker's story. What's your view of living with someone? I have no problem living with a person who is not in my bed and enjoy silence. I had a great roommate once. I do love her dearly, but neither romantically nor sexually. She remains one of my dearest friends today, and she is one of two people who hear my troubles. We lived together for 3 years, best years of my life so far. So I think if you have good experiences of living with someone and you find that there's a lot of strength in it, a lot of camaraderie, a lot of companionship, and you feel good and better for living with someone, then that's great. My experiences of living with someone else is not good. I really love being in my own space and my own place. I don't like being somewhere that feels too normal, boring. I don't like being somewhere that feels like strange and out of what I'd be interested in. I like to have my own base. I don't like sharing showers or toilets and kitchens and stuff, you know. It takes me all my time to look after myself in these areas and keep them somewhat clean and tidy. But I've got fibromyalgia, so housework just hurts. And I got 2 broken bones in my back when I'm recording this in July 2024. And so for me, you know, it's better I live on my own than I don't have someone hassling or moaning at me like, oh, why haven't you cleaned this? Why haven't you done this? You know? And it's a lot of work if you are with someone else to try and maintain that type of thing if you are injured and have got a disability. And I think you feel guilty if you don't maintain it and sustain it and keep your place half decent and, you know, tidy up after yourself. But when you live on your own, you don't have to keep tidying up on your you know, you don't have to keep tidying as much as possible on such a tight schedule, if you know what I mean, because you can just think that you have to do what's in your best interest because there's only you to consider. So, Samantha G's story. What's your view of living with someone? I want to live with people, but I would prefer them to be friends as opposed to a romantic or sexual partner. So this is very interesting as to how many people prefer to live with friends rather than a romantic partner. I think the benefit of that is that if you're gonna fall out, you probably would more likely fall out with someone in a romantic relationship than a friendship. Sometimes friendships can last a lifetime and then romantic partnerships just last like a year or a few months, right? Or a few years. But I have known people to change and then friendships to end after years as well. So I think it can be equally hard. I think another thing to consider is if you do really love living with someone, but you get so used to living with them and then they move away because they're not asexual, for example, and they want marriage, they want kids. So then they move out of living with you. That can leave you quite devastated, I think. Similarly, if friends live with you and then they move away to uni or they move abroad or go traveling and they can't live with you anymore, I think there's kind of an attachment there to them that would be very difficult if you stopped living with them, if you're used to living with them. And there are definitely pros and cons to living with someone and not living with someone. Personally, for me, I prefer, even in a relationship, to live separately. I think it's more healthier in general. I, as I said, I can't usually sleep next to someone, so I'd have a lack of sleep even more than I do already. And I just find it a lot more comfortable to be in my own space, my own place, have my own money, pay my own bills, and be completely responsible and self-sufficient like that, and accountable for myself, and be able to budget and be in total control of all that type of thing. When you're living with someone and you share things, you're not in total control because they are half in control. Do you know what I mean? And if they aren't on the same page as you as to how to spend money, that can cause real arguments in a relationship. For example, some person might think that spending money on a car is really important. If you live in the city and you don't need your car for work, or you could take alternative, cheaper or more economical ways to work, then the car is not an asset, it's just a liability. An asset is something that makes you money over and over again, or you use it to make money with. So some people that live out in the countryside are really going to need a car if they work, right? To get to their work if they don't work from home. But I live in a city, for example. I don't drive. I don't have a car. I don't have that expense. And it would just be a liability that I don't need. Walking is much more healthier for you. And I can get to pretty much wherever I want to go on a bus or a train. There's even a plane if I want it in Exeter because there's a airport. And so I don't need to do that, and it would just be a liability. Some people, they just don't think of these things. They think of, oh, and I have a nice flashy car. What? Because it looks good, but it's got to run on what, petrol, diesel, or whatever. And then you've got all the insurances and MOTs and everything like that. But if you live in a city close to all amenities and you can get around on public transport, you don't need that, do you? It's just a liability. But if I live with someone, a guy, and he's like, oh, I want a flashy car, right? One is he doesn't need a flashy car, in my opinion. An ordinary car would do. And two is an asset or liability. There is some good thing about having a car for me personally. If someone else has a car, is that I don't drive, and therefore shopping is an issue because you can shop online, but I tend to have a lot of dietary requirements. That means I need to get things from different places. For example, Aldi is a supermarket in the UK and they don't have a delivery service. And I love their soy milks. It's much cheaper. Their toilet rolls are much cheaper. Went to Aldi early with my best friend, actually. And you can get stuff there that you can't get the same tasting stuff elsewhere and the same brand, and I really like their stuff. So I think in that instance, it would be better if someone had a car, even if it's in the city, because it's further away. And when you're carrying heavy stuff, it's better to actually have a car. So there is times when it's needed. But if a guy, for example, is betting on horses or gambling, I don't personally agree with that. I don't value that. But if you're living with someone, then you can't stop them doing that because that's what they like to do. But you might think it's frivolous and wasting your money. And if you're sharing, it's kind of wasting both of your money. So you can have very different values, very different opinions about money. I think money causes a lot of problems when living with someone. I think shared bills and all that type of thing does. So personally, I prefer to have my own bank account, pay my own bills, live on my own. Then you don't have any of that extra stress that a lot of other relationships go through. You don't have all that. That puts a huge strain on your relationship. If you don't want that strain, don't have it. I love the freedom of having my own place. I love decorating it how I want. Nameless Bard, nice to see you. So I saw the other person's called Sprout with stars. That's cute. And so I think you've really got to consider a lot of factors when you live with someone. You've got to consider, what are your values? What are your goals for living together? How often do you like your friends coming round? How often do you like your family coming round? Do you like an open house where people can roll up whenever they want? Or do you like structure? If you're going to live with someone, you need to discuss all this stuff. And if you're living with someone, you'd have to find out mutual convenient times of when you can shower, when you can like do washing and stuff like this, you have to consider all the different times of the other people in the house. Whereas if you live on your own, don't have all this to worry about. Warren, money can be awful at times, and well, it makes people want more. Yeah, I don't have, and there's someone else in chat called Chua. Is that how you pronounce your name? Nice to see you all. So yeah, I don't think money is awful per se, but I think the person behind the money can be awful. And I think some people want more at anyone else's expense. So I think there are people who do earn a lot of money that don't not deserve to earn the money, that do good in the world, and there's always going to be like a Harrods. Harrods is one of the very how can I put it? Very top class retail stores, as in the sense it's very exquisite, premier pricing. So I think there'll always be people in the world that'll have premier pricing of something and lower pricing and standard pricing, you know? But I agree with Warren in the sense that people can get really greedy. And the thing that I don't like is when people will lie and do whatever it takes to get money at anyone else's expense. I like money, but I'm not motivated first and foremost by money. I'm motivated by a sense of responsibility first, then achievement, then money. So that's kind of my primary driving factors. I think it's good to be self-aware. I do another channel called Make Money, Make Cash. I teach people how to make money online using Facebook Marketplace, Vinted, and eBay. So, and KDP, Amazon KDP. So it's not loads of big amounts of money, but if you are redundant, for example, in the UK, and you haven't got enough money coming in on benefits, then you can really do with decluttering your home and getting some money for your pre-loved items. And that's what I used to have to do years ago, because when I was made redundant, the money wasn't enough. And so I had to make it up somehow. So I ended up selling pre-loved items. I got really good at it because I used to sell in retail anyway. And I love selling physical products. I love selling things online to people like that because it gives me great pleasure. I like my unwanted items that I don't want anymore going to a loving home. It makes me feel so good. So you see my motivation for making money, which isn't a ton of money. We're talking little amounts here. My motivation isn't just to declutter my home, which is a good thing anyway. It's to pass my things on to someone else who really gets pleasure out of it and joy out of it. So I think if someone has got money and they just want more money for the sake of money, and they don't really care about what's behind it, and they just want it for the sake of it, I don't think that's good. I think that's really egotistical. But I think people who want to earn a lot of money, who actually do good in the world and contribute towards the economy and, you know, pay for charity stuff and things like that, I think that's much better. So I know someone, my last short-term ex actually, he was very money driven when I first met him. Totally opposite to me. His values were completely opposite to me in the end, really. And he is driven by money in an egotistical way. It's like he thinks about buying someone something just for status, even if that person doesn't even want it themselves. It's like a status thing. I'm like, it's just not who I am. I just don't agree with it. I don't agree with buying something for someone just because you want to buy it because you've got the money to buy it. Even if they don't want it, that's like really dismissing their feelings, not caring what they want, not taking it into consideration. You're just basically saying, yeah, now I've got enough money, I want to buy this. And the person has no use for it. I'm talking like buying a car for someone who doesn't even drive and has no intention or want to drive. That is just ridiculous in my opinion. Absolutely ridiculous. And so I do think that these things can cause a lot of issues in relationships. I found out at the end we're just totally opposite, and it would have been a nightmare living together in the end because we're so different. It wouldn't have been safe for me or good, actually. And I'm glad now that that's over, that relationship. But I did actually consider living with them in the future, which I never would usually do. But I said I can't even sleep next to someone. In the end, I said, like, how would it even happen? Because I can't even sleep next to a guy. I can't sleep properly, maybe a couple of hours, and that's it. I said, how is it practically going to work? I need my own room and everything like that. Since I haven't had a job in my life and I soon will be working my first job, I'm interested in how working for money will change my vision in the world and morals. I think it depends what you're like as a person. I think it's good to get money of your own. I think it gives you independence, it gives you responsibility. It can be a good thing to work towards and earn. But I think if you look back on your deathbed, if you've got a shed load of money, but you haven't got friends around you or people who love you or care about you at the end of your life, you're going to be very miserable. You could have all the money in the world, but if you've got no one to share it with, maybe you don't need that. You can have it on your own. But if you've got no one there at the end of your life, but you've got a ton of money, how's that going to be good for you? How's that going to be happy? It's not. There's billionaires that are suicidal and actually kill themselves. They have tons of money, but it doesn't bring them happiness. Now, I'm not saying money can't bring you happiness. I think money can bring you things in your life that do bring you joy and happiness. I don't think money is evil and bad. I just think it's a person behind it, their morals and values, that decides whether that money is put to good use or got bad intentions. That makes sense. That's what I've been thinking my whole life. I hope to keep thinking that way. I have my family, but that's where it stays. Yeah, I do think it's good to have money. I do think it's important to have money. We have to have money to live, to keep a roof over our head, to keep food on the table. The more money we have, depending on how we look after our money, can ease our financial worries and burdens. But a lot of people, they tend to get more money, then they get a more expensive place, or they get a more expensive hobbies, or they get flasher cars, or they buy more and more stuff. And that isn't actually the stuff they don't need. And that's actually not an asset then. And you end up having to fight to pay the bills and stuff because you've overextended, because your income's increased, you've increased your outgoings at the same time. So it's not made much difference. So it's not just about having money, it's about the way you manage money. And obviously, if you're living on your own, you're completely accountable and responsible for your own money, for your budgeting, for what goes in and what comes out. But if you're living with someone, then you've got two people there. And if that person decides to spend the money frivolously, then it's not a good thing. If you've got two people who live together, one who's spending loads of money on God knows what, and maybe they've got a huge salary and you haven't. So you don't have much of a salary, but you're paying exactly the same money as they are. They can pay that. It's nothing to them, but then they can go out and do whatever they want. And you have not much money left and you're miserable because you're like, well, I can't pay for anything myself. Feels very deflating and very unfair. I think if a person's earning a lot more money in a relationship, then they should be paying more of the bills. Warren, yes, everyone needs friends and you can treat them as well. And being careful with money helps as well. Yeah. Yeah, you can treat friends if you've got money. I think you've got to be careful who your friends are, because I've known people in my past who've been taken advantage of because of their money. They had these people that were only around them when they had money and they were using them for their money. These people were like vulnerable adults, if you like. They had autism and they were classed as vulnerable adults. Autism, schizophrenia, so like special needs maybe. Both of them had schizophrenia and both of them were autistic. I'm not in contact with either of them anymore, but both of them were used for their money by so-called friends. So I think you've got to be very careful that, and it depends where you're a vulnerable adult yourself or not as well, but people can take advantage. So I think it's better to to only trust a few people about your money, if you know what I mean, who you tell about your money, because you could get into a relationship with someone, they're literally just after your money, especially if they think that you're loaded. Yeah, I currently think money is overrated. It's important, but I think people are chasing money too much. Yeah, it's interesting because I've been in the entrepreneur space since 2012. I found out I'm asexual in 2014, started this channel in 2015. So I actually came to the entrepreneur space before I helped Asexuals. And I have pursued money in some ways, but I've always wanted to help people. And I'm interested in different ways of making money online, but I cannot lie and I can't be something I'm not just to get money. And so the people, in my opinion, not everyone, I've got a mentor, coach, and trainer, and he's very, very honest, and he earns a lot of money. And I paid a lot of money to be in his public speaking courses last year. But there are a lot of people, not all, like I've just said, who will do whatever it takes to make a lot of money. They will lie. I can't do that. I cannot lie to make a ton of money. And if I could, then I'd probably have a lot more money by now. But I can't do that. And I won't do that. It's immoral to me. And I have a conscience. I don't want to die thinking, God, I got all this money by deceiving people. I don't like that. I'm not a deceiver. I'm an honest person. I can't sit there lying. And probably to my detriment sometimes that I'm so honest. You know what I mean? I find it like these videos, you might notice they're usually not edited. I'm just live a lot of the time, raw, real, live. And even on Instagram, I don't usually filter myself. I'm just usually me. I don't wear makeup. Do you know what I mean? So I have to be authentically me. And I think if you get money being authentically you, then that's where you really want to be, in the world. But I think you need to learn about money, like what is an asset and what is a liability. What do you allow yourself as fun time and what do you put aside for your savings for the future? I feel the same way. Breaking moral laws is too hard for me as well. And when I do, to my mum, as an example, I make a clear face showing that I lie because I just find being dishonest so hard. I can't lie. I don't lie. I hate all lying completely. I don't lie. I'm so honest. Some people say, like, you're the most honest person I know, Sandra. So I hate lying as well. They say, yeah, I just can't stand it. I'm very authentic. Some people probably don't like me, and I'm okay with that because I'd rather be my true authentic self. People take money off vulnerable people are nasty, and that's really sorry. I'm trying to read your comments, but there's little emojis on YouTube that cover up the last comment, so I can't see all of it. But I do agree that people take money off vulnerable people are nasty, and that's really something. Never lie either. Oh, you never lie either. Yeah. So, oh, bad. Oh, and that's really bad. Thank you, Warren. Sorry. It's just like YouTube has got this really weird thing where they've got a heart in the bottom right of my screen, and that literally covers up the last little line of the chat, the last bit of it that stuck out. So if it's like a sentence long, it's a long bit, it cuts off. So I can still see it if it's a tiny bit underneath. It's I think they put it in the wrong place. It should be in somewhere else. But YouTube, are you listening? And so yeah, so when you live with someone, you've got to consider like a lot of stuff. You've got to consider first of all your environment. And do you agree on the environment? Like, do you inside environment, outside environment? So first of all, it's the location. Like, if you're living with someone or going to live with someone, do they prefer the city the town or the countryside. People don't think about this, but it's a major thing you need to consider. I personally don't ever want to live in the countryside again. I don't like it, much to people's probably disgust, because most people want to move from a city to the countryside where it's quiet. I'm not like that at all. I lived out in the countryside for years. It did not suit my personality. I'm an extrovert. I felt cut off from the world. I felt disconnected from it. I felt weird. I know now that that was not the right place for me to personally be. My parents love living out in the countryside. They are introverts, although they live in a town now. And they like living out in the sticks with no one around them. I am the opposite. I need to be around people. I get energized being around people. I like being independent. I like the fact I live in the heart of the city and I could just walk up the road to supermarkets and shops whenever I feel like it. And that to me is great. It gives me a lot of autonomy and stuff. But I spoke to some asexuals, for example, and I've had guys that have been interested in me, not just asexuals, heterosexuals, and say we're talking about the future. Like, what does your future look like? Where do you want to live? I usually find out that their ideal place to live is out in the countryside somewhere. And I'm like, that couldn't be further from what I want. And there's absolutely, excuse me, I've got to move my leg. There's absolutely no way that I want to go and live out in the countryside again. I don't want that. Oh, sorry. I had to put my charger in, so it went a bit dark. And yeah, so you've got to really consider that. And that is something I didn't consider in the past because it was never an issue with exes. We always kind of like would want the same place to live in. I've always lived in cities, well, in Exeter since I left college, since I left home, since I left my parents. I've stayed in the same city. And so I always tended to live with people here. But just because you find someone in a city doesn't mean to say they want to stay in a city. A lot of the time, people want to be out on the sticks in the countryside. I'm not interested in that. I'm not actually a countryside person per se. I'm not really into nature. But having said that, I went to the quayside, which is in my city, with my best friend earlier. And that was good because it's a bit of countryside in the city, in the heart, like, well, it's further down rather than the heart. But there is the cathedral and the cathedral grounds in the heart of the city, which is just up the road from me. So I've got the best of both worlds. Do you know what I mean? Because I've got the city and a bit of countryside in the city. But there's absolutely no way I want to live in the countryside ever again. And so if a guy wants to retire to the countryside, for example, and wanted me to live with him, that was my worst nightmare. I don't drive. I never intend to drive in my life. And living out in the countryside, I'd be cut off from everywhere. Yes, you can get some public transport, but you have to wait. And you end up relying on the guy. And I just don't want that. I hate it. I absolutely hate it. I like to be independent, go where I want, do what I want when I want. And so, yeah, you've got to factor all this into consideration. Like, so where do you want to live? Countryside, town, or city? And if you live in the city, for example, like, do you want to live in the center of the city or do you want to live in the outskirts of the city? This is important questions. Countryside, do you want to live in a bus route or do you want to live like anywhere and then get a car, for example? In the town, do you want a small town? Do you want a big town that's nearly the same as a city? There's all these questions to ask. And then there's the internal environment. Like, how many rooms do you want? How many bedrooms do you want? Do you want an office room? Do you want more than one bathroom? What do you want the interior to look like? What color decor do you want? What furniture do you want? I have lived in both countryside and in the city, and I honestly like both as much. I enjoy the peacefulness of the countryside, but I can also appreciate the city's cozy background noises. Yes, I consider cars driving around cozy. Oh, I get that because I'm extrovert. That makes sense. I feel that way too, even though I'm not all self-dependent because of autism. P. Aris, is that how you pronounce your name? I hope I've got that right. Thank you for being honest. I appreciate that. Yeah. Yeah, I like noise. I'm an extrovert. And when you said that you think the city's got cozy background noises, I know exactly what you mean. Because I'm extrovert, it gives me a sense of place having noises around me. It gives me a sense of, like you say, coziness. I mean, obviously, if it's people shouting and swearing at each other, then that's not good. But if it's just like some nice background noise, you get used to it. When I first lived here, it was too noisy because the soundproofing was horrible. But I've actually, with my best friend, managed to put soundproof against a window without actually altering the window at all, because these are listed buildings. And that was quite difficult. I came up with solutions myself and found soundproofing techniques. So this is a lot better soundproof now. It used to be that I could hear every conversation in the street as if I was just stood next to them, part of a conversation. But now it's more muffled in the background, so it's good. And I particularly needed to muffle it for when I'm doing my live streams, when I'm doing podcast interviews. But something else I like talking about background noises, when I go and sit in a pub eating, I don't drink alcohol, right? And you can hear people talking in the background, and that's like cozy noise. And sometimes, because I'm an extrovert, which introverts probably don't do, I close my eyes and I'm like, oh wow, I can hear all the noises of the people chattering in the background. And that makes me feel really good. But I get energy from being around people as an extrovert. So there indeed seems to be much more to living with someone than I first interpreted. I've never thought about a future with someone in my life, and I don't know any people that I wish to get to know more currently. You can call me Peter. Oh, thank you, Peter. So yeah, there is a lot to living, because I've lived with guys before, and when you move out of home, which I did, I left college, and the next day I was moved out of home and in with my first boyfriend, which probably was a mistake to some extent, in the sense that it wasn't a good relationship. I've had 2 long-term relationships, both of which were not good, abusive, right? From them to me, it's not good. And I did fight back some of the time in the end, though, which can make you feel quite guilty and bad. But you get to the stage sometimes where you just have had enough. I don't usually talk about that, but nowadays I'm like, I don't want to live with anyone. I don't want that scenario ever happening again in my life, because it's not who I am. But I think you do have to stick up for yourself, and sometimes you get to a point where you've just had enough. And so, going back to what I was saying, there's a lot of things to consider which I didn't consider when I just left college and moved in. So you've got your environment, internal environment as well. Like, are you going to have a self-contained flat? Can you both afford a self-contained flat? Or are you just going to have a room in a house, or a room with an ensuite? The more small and confined your area, the more you can end up arguing, the more it can turn into a bad relationship as well, because you're very in a confined space. It's like a pressure cooker. And sometimes in the past, I've even shared a single bed in a relationship, and that is so hard. You don't want to be doing that. But when you've got not much money, and like you've just got a bed set and you've got a partner, you'll have them stay over in your single bed. And he'll be like, I've got my own double bed here. This is my own bed, right? But when I was back in that position, you don't really get much of a choice. You just take what you're given. And it's like horrendous. Peter, I also get energy from being around people, but I find it hard to be around others because I like deep and meaningful conversations, and that's not something most people enjoy. I might be ambivert. Yeah, it sounds like, sorry, that you might be ambivert when you said that you're equally happy in the countryside because it's peaceful, or the city where it has noise in the background because you feel cozy by that. I would say that's probably ambivert personally, although I'm not an ambivert myself. I'm an extrovert, but I do have some introverted tendencies because I spend a lot of time on my own, a lot of time, probably an unhealthy amount of time. Sometimes I think I'm like, oh, I should be out a bit more. But and other times it's healthy because I'm being self-reliant and I'm doing what I love, writing books for asexuals, changing lives, doing the live streams. I love doing this live stream. So good. I love being here with all you. Just think about how many people we're connected to here right now. It's just incredible. I love that feeling. I know some are asexuals, and some people who watch me are not asexual at all. Love to all. And so what was I saying? So internal, so you have to think about your environment. Like, are you going to have a self-contained flat? And you've got to bear in mind that some walls are paper thin, like where I live. So it probably means that other people can hear me talk on my live streams like I'm doing now, which is probably not very helpful to the people that can hear it. But it's difficult because it's part of my work and what I do. So I can't just not do it. Do you know what I mean? I usually do it at late night. That's the time that you've got used to, because that's when it's most convenient for me, because I've got my other work to do in the day. So I'm usually streaming like between 11 and midnight. That's when I start. So that's kind of my time, the majority of time. And I can't just like stop doing my work, because you can't stop someone doing their work when it's their work, if you know what I mean. I class this as, although it's my joy, it's my work as well, if you know what I mean. I regularly like to be in communication with my readers, my audience, just people I care about, and help asexuals. And I'm kind of on American time, even though I live in the UK, so it's kind of strange. But yeah, so you've got to like, that's another thing to consider. Time schedules. Like, if you are a night owl like I am, and the other person's not, they work in the day, then they go to sleep early at night. That doesn't really work out very well, because you're on completely different sleep schedules, completely different time schedules. There's some people that get up really early, for example, then they go to bed early. I'm the opposite. I usually get up late and go to sleep in the early hours of the morning. And if you're living with someone and they get up early to go to work, then they can have the shower on and wake you up. Or they could be cooking breakfast and wake you up. And you just want to like continue lying there, and go to sleep if that's your sleep time. But when it comes to them going to bed, like say 10 or 11 at the latest, you're there till like 2 or 4 in the morning. You're there all being happy, jolly, and high energy vibration. Or I am at that time in the morning often. Then it's like it doesn't match, because you're wanting to like listen to music, jump up and down or whatever. It's kind of backwards to each other. And so unless you've got a house or flat that really warrants that, or you can make sure that you're both happy with that arrangement, it's not going to work. I've had guys in the past, and I've said to them and warned them, I said, like, really, it's better for you to not stay in my home. It's better for you to get a hotel somewhere else, because I stay up till the early hours of the morning. I can't sit there trying to go to sleep at 10 p.m. when I'm not tired. It's not who I am, so don't expect me to do that. And then some of them have moaned in the past, "Oh, you're keeping me awake." It's like, well, I told you not to be with me in that way. Everyone probably has some overlapping personality traits, I guess. That makes people who they are. Yeah, I mean, overlapping usually means that they overlap as in there's commonalities and similarities, but you can also have people that collide as well, as in the personalities don't, the lifestyles or the personalities don't match. You don't have to have an exact match, but you have to, either has to be the same, similar, or complementary values and personalities. Really, your core values should be the same or similar, and then your compatibility, you need to be compatible with each other in multiple ways to be in a relationship in the first place. Your values have to be the same, even if you do different activities. But you have to think of lifestyle. Lifestyle is such a huge one that people don't take into consideration enough, I don't think. I didn't used to think about this years ago, because I lived a fairly normal life, 9 to 5 or 10 to 6, going to retail job life. I was so bored in that life. It was like go to work, come home, cook food, watch TV, speak a little bit, kiss, go to sleep. That was basically my life, and it wasn't fulfilling for me. It was boring. And now I prefer to just live my life my way, and I prefer to go to sleep later. I'm happier being energetic at night. It's who I am, and so if you're on different time scales and different schedules, people can make it work, but it depends if you end up resenting each other for keeping each other awake at the times when you need your sleep and the other person's awake. You know what I mean? I can find myself in that as well. I like just doing anything around others and what sharing what do with others. Sorry, YouTube covers up the thing. So you can find yourself like that as well. So you're kind of like don't mind doing stuff around others and sharing what others want to do. Is that right? So you kind of work with the other person a lot. Have I got that right? And so, yeah, I guess it depends what type of person you are, but it's good not to be a people pleaser all the time. Like if you just get a lot of joy and pleasure out of pleasing someone else, fair enough, but there are people called people pleasers in the world. And the reason people please is because they actually want to be accepted, and they feel that if they said what they really want, they wouldn't be accepted. And so that can lead to unhealthy behaviors where you keep what you really want to yourself and don't tell the other person for fear that they'll leave you, abandon you, or won't be happy to be with you, won't feel good to be around you. So we should only be doing something to make other people happy if it's not at our own expense. We shouldn't just be doing things to people please someone else because we want someone to like us all the time, because there is going to be times when you don't get on. There is going to be times when you disagree. There is going to be times when you have conflict, even in a healthy relationship, but it's how you resolve the conflicts usually that determine whether the relationship is actually healthy and stays healthy. So you have to deal with conflict resolution. I even find that difficult. It's something I still work on because I don't like conflict personally myself. I really don't. Yes, I do not want to adapt myself for other people. I want to be my own person, unrelated of what people think of my interests, values, and hobbies. Okay, great. And what did you say? I really like to, as an example, play piano when others are listening. I can find myself in that as well. I like just doing anything around others and sharing what I do with others. Right, I can read what you said now. So you like sharing what you do with other people. That's good. And you like playing piano. That's amazing. Congratulations. I'm glad that you do not want to adapt yourself for other people. It's hard because obviously if you live with someone, you have to make some adjustments for them, and they have to make some adjustments for you usually. So this is where it gets tricky because I think you can lose your identity in a relationship. And also, I think, you do change yourself. You kind of have to change to a certain extent because you can't completely be the same as a single person. It just doesn't work. So, for example, like I don't like people coming round the house who I don't know just showing up to my home. I don't like that. I hate it. I can't stand it. I don't like people staying in my home. I don't, there's things I don't like. But if I'm in a relationship and they've got, say I lived with someone and they had a friend who lived abroad, and the friend who lived abroad is coming over to the UK for a week. I personally would rather that person stay in a hotel, not stay in our home. But that other person might really want their friend to stay with them in our home. So then I'd have to make a decision. Do I completely refuse? No, that friend's never ever staying in our home. I'm not having it. Or do I say, okay, it's just for 1 week. It'll make you happy. And your friend hasn't seen you in ages. So even though I don't really like it, I'm not that happy about it. I'll do it because I want you to be happy. And I realize it's not that often you see them. So you know what I mean? It's kind of really difficult, isn't it? Because that's going to make me uncomfortable for all that week. I probably wouldn't even want to be in my home for that week. I'd feel like left out of my own home. So it's hard one, isn't it? Because it's like you want to accommodate someone's friend because it's their friend. And you don't want to say to them, oh, you can never, ever have your friends stay over in our home if they really like their friend and they're used to doing that when they were single. Do you know what I mean? It's quite hard. It's like the last guy with he was Indian, and it's traditional that the parents come and stay with their, grown up child when they come to a different country. I personally hated that idea, but I was willing to say okay for that time because I thought that was some change I could do for the person. The person ended up being no good for me in the end, so it's completely irrelevant now. But I kind of like wanted to say that it's difficult when you live with someone. Like if I got into a relationship with a guy and he's always used to his mates coming around whenever they feel like it, and I'm used to the exact opposite, like I don't have anyone come round unexpectedly, then it's like, how do you meet in the middle over that? Can you meet in the middle over it? Because I would be really uncomfortable with mates just turning up. I wouldn't ever want that. But then if I said to him, well, I'm not happy with your mates turn up whenever they feel like it, he might feel trapped like that because he might have no freedom. He might be like, well, it's just normal for me to do that. I've done it all my life. So it's very difficult. Peter, I see how it can become hard to make sacrifices in a relationship. Yeah, it's really difficult. Peter, I understand. Oh, that's what Peter says before. I understand you, even though I have a little opinions on things. I think I'm extremely open-minded about a lot, and I don't easily get uncomfortable, so I can't completely understand it, I think. But I see how it can become hard to make sacrifices in a relationship. Yeah, it's very difficult, I think, if you're very opposite to someone. Like, I like structure. I don't really do much stuff that is random or spontaneous. I am willing to do some, but it's not something I usually do in my life. Like, I had one of my friends when she was living over here. She used to like spontaneously meeting up every so often. But there was a pattern to her spontaneity. So it used to be a Friday at about 3 o'clock. She would come to my city, do bingo, and then she would meet me for a food afterwards. But this might only happen like once every 2 months. But usually, if I suspected that it might be going to happen, I would kind of keep that time free just in case, or be flexible over that time. Because I adapted to the way she was. But if you're living with someone, you know, your personal space is your personal space, but it's their personal space. You can't exactly dictate totally who comes into their personal space. But yet you've got to have boundaries. So it's like, where do you have those boundaries? And where do you allow someone to have their freedom? Because you don't want to feel like you're controlling them, or you're stifling them, or you're trapping them. And the other person, i.e. me, doesn't want to feel like they're having an unexpected guest that makes them feel uncomfortable in their own home, and they just don't even want to be at their own home. That makes them feel unwanted in that time. That makes them feel like they're in the way. They're a burden in their own home. They're then just like superfluous at that time. Do you know what I mean? It's two completely different points of view of the same situation. I mean, you could look at the ideal scenario as I become friends with their friends, so we're all friends together, and I'm more comfortable about having them in the home. But even so, just imagine if I was in somewhere, and then I would just want to go home and rest on the bed. I couldn't rest on the bed if his mates were all there, unless I had separate rooms and maybe. But then I'd want to go to the toilet. I'd want to get food. I might just want to put my pajamas on and stuff. But I can't do that if his friends are there. You know what I mean? This is all hypothetical because I live on my own. But I just wanted to say some of the difficulties with living together that people don't think about. You know, if you've got shared household bills and incomes, I think that's one of the worst things. If they're frivolous with their money, they like gambling, they like to play the lottery, they like betting on horses, they like putting money into things that you don't think is an asset. They just like spending loads of money on flashy cars and gold jewelry and stuff like that. And you're there wanting to save up for something that's an asset, or put money aside for a rainy day, or save up for something like, I don't know, like this bed, for example, that I am laid on now that you can't see. This was a specially made bed. This is when I was a manager years ago. It's quite, I've had it a long time, right? And I was earning shed loads of money back then because I was a manager. I worked hard for it though. I was on commission and salary, but I earned just as much in commission as I did salary. So this was a really expensive bed, but this was needed because, I mean, I have a chronic pain condition now, so I have to have a really expensive bed. I didn't know it at the time, but it's the best type of bed, but I've got a topper on it now and all sorts. So that is an asset because it's helping my health. But someone might just decide they could have a car, but no, they want 2 cars when they don't actually need 2 cars. They want, they want to buy like a mansion, but they don't think about the upkeep of that mansion and the fact that if they haven't got children even, and they've got like 4 rooms in the house, you don't need it. But of course, for appearance's sake, it looks good. Do you know what I mean? If you completely different values on these things, it's not going to work. You know, you might have completely different morals as well. And something the other person might do might make you feel really angry towards them. If you live with someone and they make you angry all the time or resentful and you don't like the way they are, then that's just going to cause ill feeling in your own home. There's nothing worse than being in your own home and not even feeling like you belong in your own home, feeling like it's horrible tension, feeling like the person is just not on the same page as you, this person is too different from you, and you just don't feel good. Yeah, I really have difficulty with materialistic people, even though that is probably a little bit of hypocrite. Well, yeah, I mean, I don't dislike materialistic things per se, but I do dislike people who are materialistic, as in the sense that that's what their main focus is on. Like they want things for the sake of it when it's not really needed, to the extreme, you know? So I think things in moderation are fine. Like, I do like nice clothes to wear, but you know, that sometimes I don't have enough clothes for certain occasions, actually. And I tend not to spend that much money on clothes. Usually it's my birthday or Christmas money I get from my mum or uncle and auntie that I put towards buying clothes for myself. You know, and other people, they just spend money on clothes every month, getting new outfits for the hell of it, because they just like clothes. Do you know what I mean? Whereas I tend to buy things mostly for practical reasons, but I don't think there's any problem in buying something nice that looks nice or having an experience now and again. But if you're just spending thousands of pounds just to look good on stuff you don't really need, that's a really contradiction from what I believe is good. Communication is indeed key, but if you don't genuinely understand each other after a discussion, would it be worth to review whether the relationship will last? Yeah. I mean, compatibility is key, and communication is essential to try and make it compatible. But if you're not compatible, it won't last. You have to be compatible in multiple areas. You have to both want the same thing, both want the same type of relationship, both be having the same sort of relationship goals, both be aware of each other's individual goals, both be working as a team together. If for example, one person wants to go traveling around the world and the other person is settled in their job, that relationship's going to fall apart very quickly. You don't want someone moving in to live with you 6 months down the line, like, well, I'm going off to Australia now because I want to travel. And then you're settled in your job and then want to stay where you are, because that person is then going to go off and leave, plus leave you with trying to find someone else to pay the bills, for example. So you've got to know what is the long-term goal they've got and short-term goals. And compatibility is essential. And you've got to have healthy communication. A lot of people don't have healthy communication. It's not easy because a lot of people haven't been trained in communication skills. I still try to improve my communication. I've done quite a lot of self-development work, but I still know there's areas I need to improve on. And it's hard. Conflict resolution, I found through research, is one of the ways of telling whether a relationship will last or not, is how well people are able to resolve conflicts in a relationship, which you wouldn't focus on. You'd be like, why am I focused on conflict in a relationship? Like, you want to focus on all the good stuff, but actually it's not true in terms of like staying power in a relationship. It's good to focus on the good stuff, but if you ignore the other stuff that builds resentment and frustration and anger and anguish and anxiety, and you don't deal with it, then it's not going to last. It's just going to end up eventually one person leaving the other because they can't cope anymore because they've had unresolved issues between the both of them. So if people genuinely don't understand each other, then yes, after discussion, you probably will have to end the relationship. And it's not necessarily that people don't understand each other. It's they work out that they are too different and that their values and beliefs are the opposite. They're not the same. With my short-term ex, which I didn't mean for it to be short term, but it ended up being that way. In the end, I realized we're completely different in values. He values materialistic things over people. So he'll do whatever it takes, whatever dodgy stuff, lying, deceiving is what he values. I value honesty. He valued like items that are really expensive, thousands and thousands of pounds, even if people don't need them, over love and honesty and seeing the value of genuine connection with people. So he was into fighting, thinks fighting is a way to resolve something if someone doesn't agree with him and he's right, which is very egotistical, and it's completely opposite to the way I am. I believe that fighting is never the answer apart from in self-defense. Like if you have to defend yourself because someone's coming at you, fair enough. But I don't believe in just saying, well, I'm right, so I've got to smack you in the face now. It's just not what I believe in. He like betting on things. I don't like that. I don't even like alcohol and stuff like that. You know, I can tolerate a guy drinking alcohol in a relationship. Smoking, I just can't have because it affects my health. But I'd really rather have someone who didn't drink much alcohol at all. Do you think brutal honesty is beneficial in a relationship? Example, you don't look good today. No, you wouldn't say stuff like that. You wouldn't say you don't look good today. You wouldn't speak like that to someone. I so in order to have healthy communication, you should never or try at all times to avoid the word you in every conversation that you have to do with conflict. For example, you can't always avoid the word you, but you've got to say how you feel. So you've always got to focus on how you feel. So if someone, for example, like you live together and you ask the person before your work, please can you fill the dishwasher? So that when I come back and put it on, so when I come back home, the dishes are ready so I can cook us some food. Just an example. I don't like cooking for others. That's another reason why I don't want to live with someone. I hate cooking. I especially don't want to cook for others, even though a lot of people like my food videos on this channel, my shorts videos. And then the other person doesn't do that dishwasher at all. They just leave all the dirty dishes in the sink or whatever, and they don't do it. And the other person gets home and they can't cook the meal now. The other person comes home and goes, I thought you were cooking tonight. It's your turn to cook. Why didn't you cook? And then like, because you didn't fill the dishwasher, which is true facts, right? But what you could say is, oh, when I came home, I felt really disappointed that the dishwasher wasn't filled up like I asked. And now it means that I have to hand wash all the dishes before I start cooking food. And I've had a really hard day at work and I really don't feel like washing up before cooking food. You could even say, can we get a takeaway instead? Or what would you suggest we do about this? Because obviously I can't cook food and have it ready for you now because this is a situation. So how can we resolve this together? This is the type of language you use. Telling someone like you don't look good today is putting them down. It's not nice. And why would you speak to someone like that you loved and cared about? I would never tell someone they don't look good. To me, if I love someone, they always look good, no matter where they're sick or not even. I don't personally have that opinion, and I don't think that's a nice thing to say. You don't look good today. I think it's a very horrible thing. I wouldn't like to be in a relationship with that type of person who's using that type of language. Looks are very subjective. And I think if you truly love someone, even if they're sick and they're ill in hospital or whatever, you still think they look beautiful to you because in the sense that you love them. Do you know what I mean? If you said you don't look good today, you'd be putting the person down, making the person feel shit about themselves, and you would not be a loving, kind, caring, supportive partner at all. If you didn't think, if you might say to something like, "Oh, is everything okay?" Because you don't look like your usual self or something like that. Do you know what I mean? The values between people is a very interesting topic to discuss. Like you're saying, fighting to resolve a problem doesn't sound like it would fit in my book. Oh yeah, I learned about that in school. I learned about this entire concept, and it's also used to raise kids healthily, I believe. Sorry, getting off topic here. Yes, if you truly love someone, you'd always want to see that person no matter what state. Yeah. Yeah, I think there's an element of ego if you're telling someone else as well that you don't look good. It's like that you're looking better than them or something's better than them. You know what I mean? I would never say that because, I mean, just think about how that would lower that person's self-esteem. So in relationships, healthy relationships, we're supposed to add to someone's life, not take it away. That we're supposed to be helping that person to have the best life possible with us. So they should be as happy with us as they are being single or happier. That's what it should be. But both people should want that responsibility. If a one person wants responsibility in that way, but the other person doesn't, that's not going to work. It's an unequal relationship. Does that make sense? So you've got to want the best for each other. You've got to want kindness and caring and compassion between each other. You've got to be able to share things that are difficult in the relationship in a healthy way. I don't like bringing up conflicts. Like, I don't like bringing up things that are upsetting me and could turn into conflict. I don't like that. I do find it really difficult, but I've had to have a few difficult conversations that's actually ended up being really good because I'm trying to practice conflict resolution more where with someone I'm safe with. You can't do this with unsafe people that are abusers and narcissists. They're unsafe. You can't do this type of thing with them because they don't want to cooperate. They don't have your best interests at heart. They use things against you. So it's got to be someone you feel safe with and that you can say, look, when this happened, I felt this way. And you can even say to the person, look, I'm really scared about having this conversation with you now. I've said this before, like, I don't like having these type of conversations, but things are on my mind. And I feel if I don't speak my mind, things are just going to build up and not feel good for me, which in turn is not going to be good for our friendship or relationship. So I need to tell you this thing and ask your opinion about it. You know what I mean? It's really hard, I think, especially if you've been used to unsafe people and people reacting badly to stuff like that. It's very difficult to be able to do that because you're kind of anticipating a reaction. There's going to be them leaving, them going off in a huff, them shouting at you, or losing control, or just dismissing your feelings, giving you the silent stream. All these are bad responses, right? But there's a lot of people in the world that don't deal with conflict very well, and it's something we all have to work on and get better at. So no one's amazing at it. A lot of people are imperfect at it, and if you're not used to practicing it, which I'm not used to practicing it, but it's something I've had to start to do more of because I realize it's going to be better for me and other people in the long term, then it's hard. But you can't do this as well with an avoidant person. Avoidant person usually, when I say you can't do this with avoidant, it depends if you've had an avoidant person who's worked on themselves. If you've got someone who's avoidant attachment type, which means they avoid intimacy, they avoid conversations, they avoid conflict, they avoid difficult conversations, they avoid giving the answers you want sometimes. If you've got an avoidant, it's very difficult to have these conversations with them. But if they've done work on themselves to become less avoidant and they really care about you and love you, then it is possible that you can have still conversations where they will listen to you and they will try and do something about it and rectify the situation so it's fine again. So not all is lost. It depends if they've done any work on themselves or not. So true. I've noticed that. Yeah, so I'm going to go to bed now. I really enjoyed this live stream, and I'm glad I joined this stream. Oh, thank you, Pete. It's really nice to have you here. Yeah, so we've talked about internal environments, and we've talked about external environments as well. So that's something to bear in mind. We've discussed goals. You both have to have the kind of the same relationship goals plus individual goals that each other's aware of. There's always going to be compatibility issues if you're not careful, so you really need to discuss them. So you need to be discussing the compatibility of living together or not living together, and the compatibility of actually the relationships in terms of values, ethics, morals, beliefs, lifestyle, family, friends, relations. Do you know what I mean? Boundaries with them. And so there's a lot to consider. Living with someone is a huge, huge thing that I think people don't give enough attention to. It's kind of like we jump in. I jumped in the past. I didn't know any different. I'm like, hey, let's just go and live together. And then all the hard work begins and the arguments if you're not used to it and don't know what to expect, and you end up with someone who's not that compatible with you. It can be a friggin' nightmare. You can have disagreements. You can both be at odds with each other. And if you've got to live in that environment, it's just no good. Like with my short-term ex, I said about I don't know how we'd live together. And plus I said, if you're into fighting, I don't want to that type of life. I do not want to be living with someone who thinks that way. Because he used to fight with his sister over like what TV channel to watch. And I'm like, I don't want to be living with someone like that. It's not comfortable for me. Which it really isn't. You know what I mean? I don't want to live with someone like that. I don't like fighting anyway. Fighting's a red flag for someone who might hurt you. So if someone starts saying they love fighting, unless they do it for an actual profession, then it's a red flag to quickly walk out the door, walk away. Because if someone thinks that fighting when they're right, so they're talking from ego, is a good thing to do, it's not. It's a red flag for they could potentially turn around and start hurting you. Huge red flag, dangerous. So do not attempt to go and live with these type of people. If people display narcissistic or abusive traits, don't live with these people. Right? If you must stay in a relationship for a time with them, which I don't recommend doing, then make sure you're living separately to get to know more and more and see if these traits are consistent, these negative traits. And I would, recommend leaving ASAP, right? Also, you've got to think about different types of foods with living together. Something else we've not discussed so far. So if you're vegan or vegetarian, then you've got meat eater. How's that going to work? How's that going to work out with pots and pans when you're cooking? How's that going to work out with smells? How's that going to work out with physical contact, like kissing? People don't think about these things, but some vegans or vegetarians, they don't want meat in their home. They don't like the taste of meat in their mouth if you're kissing them. They don't like the smells. You can't contaminate things like, you have to keep cutlery separate and all this type of thing sometimes. Do you know what I mean? And if you're a meat eater, like where are you going to keep your food in comparison to theirs? You might have to sort it out that you have separate compartments. You might have to clean your teeth or mouthwash every time you eat meat just to kiss them and be intimate with them. Clean your teeth and stuff like that to make sure you're fresh for them. If you want to compromise and live together still in those type of environments. Some people who are vegan and vegetarians can't stand anyone else eating animals. They, if they're very animal conscious, they would resent you, and that resentment might just be too much to take in your own home. Do you know what I mean? So you've got to be very careful of that. They've got values, you've got values, but maybe you're a meat eater. I mean, if you're on the keto diet, there's lots of people on the keto diet these days, which I'm not. But I don't eat red meat. I eat chicken and turkey and fish still. But it's high in pork, lamb, and beef and stuff like this. There's a lot of red meat involved. Well, I don't know if people class pork as a red meat, but it's a lot of meat involved, right? And so if you're a non-meat eater, that can be really hard. If you're someone who's teetotal, I'm teetotal, and then you've got someone who's really into drinking alcohol and wants to leave bottles of wine in the fridge and beers and have friends over like that, that might really feel ugly to you in your own home. Because who you choose to surround yourself with, the decor that you use, where objects are in your home, who you have in your home. This all adds to the aura and energy of your home as to whether you feel good in it or not. And people don't think about this. They don't think about it this deep. But when you live on your own, you can decorate it how you want. Carpets, curtains, unless it's rented, of course, and you have restrictions. You can get whatever furniture you want. You can have it the way you want. My last long-term ex, he was really tall, and I'm short. And when we lived separately in the end, his place he lived was suitable for a tall guy like himself, 6'3". So he used to have stuff high up. When I lived at my old place, the ceilings were low down, suitable for me. So he would sometimes bang his head, which I lived there for years. So, you know what I mean? It's not my fault the ceilings were low, but he would sometimes bang his head or have to crouch down to get things. Whereas if I was in his home, I would be like, can you reach up to the top? Because I can't even reach up there. So you've got to take all these things into account if it's going to be suitable. Right? If you're someone who's with a uni student and they've just got loads of students coming over to do projects with them, and you're like wanting some peace and quiet and time out in your own home, but you can't because they've got all their mates coming round and they do the projects and then they're off watching Netflix or whatever and having beers and laughing all the time. You know, you might feel like, oh my God, I can't get any work done here. I've got to leave my own home. So there's so much scope for conflict and difficulties and ill feelings in your own home if you're very different to each other or leading different lifestyles, doing different things. There's nothing wrong with leading different lifestyles to a certain extent, doing different things if you can make it work. It might work splendidly sometimes because if you are on different shift patterns, you might be able to have someone around when they're working to the home, and they might be able to have someone around when you're working, or vice versa. So it could work out really well. Some people's lifestyles are different, might work well. So one person might want to get up early, go to the gym, do their day's work, then chill out in the evening. But the other person might get up late, do their work, and then have some time with the person in the evening, then continue to work. But they don't get up early, so they're not actually disturbing the person who wants to get up early to go to the gym. So their gym routine's never messed up. Because they can always get up early to go to the gym because they know the person's going to be asleep because that's their sleep time. So sometimes it can work out well. But if that person goes to the gym and then works and then comes home late and the other person's still working and you can't see each other, it might not be good. So you have to take all these factors into consideration, which a lot of people don't think about. And if you're an asexual person and you're sex repulsed, for example, it might be very difficult to live with a heterosexual because heterosexuals tend to want sex if they live with you and they share a bed with you. Makes them more horny, makes them want to turn around and just like have sex with you. You know, they might try and instigate sex if you live together. But even if you don't live together and they come and visit you, it might be the sex time they want with you. It's quite common for heterosexuals. They haven't seen you for like 3 days or whatever. Like, oh, we're seeing each other now. It's sex time because I love my sex. You know what I mean? So you've got to take all this into consideration. And, you know, if you are uncomfortable with physical touch, do you want to really share a bed with someone? If you're not used to someone in your physical space, do you want to share that with someone? Maybe you could share it temporarily, but is it going to feel good to share it forever with that person if you're planning a forever relationship? Maybe it's just better that you have separate homes and stay over each other's home like 2 nights each a week or something, and then have 1 or 2 nights separate from each other or something like that, you know? So the world is your oyster. It means that there's lots of scope to do things, but there's also a lot of things that can make you feel uncomfortable in your own home if you're sharing it with someone else for the reasons I've stated. But some people love the companionship. They love the fact they've got someone there for them to rely on, to care for them. They love sharing their bed with someone. They love sharing their home. They feel much more content having a solid base and foundation with another person. They want someone to share their life with. They feel good about having that person around. They always have someone to talk to. They don't really feel lonely unless that person's not a healthy person for them, because you can feel absolutely lonely in your own home if that person is not being good to you and not making you feel good or helping you to keep staying good like you felt before you were with them, for example. So bear all this stuff in mind. Okay, I hope you've liked this stream tonight. Thank you so much for being here. Don't forget to give this video a thumbs up if you like it. Thank you to everyone in chat tonight. It's been amazing. There's been Sprout earlier, Nameless Bard earlier, Chua, I hope I've pronounced your name correctly. Warren Jones, nice to see you. Peter, nice to see you. Yes, it's been a pleasure. Don't forget to grab a copy of Asexual Perspectives, 47 Asexual Stories on Amazon, which is where I've been reading from tonight. And don't forget to also get this best-selling book, Diary Confessions of a Hyper-Romantic Asexual, 78 Life Lessons to Ace Your Life. Both are on Amazon, and Asexual Perspectives is currently also available on Barnes & Noble, Waterstones, Blackwell's, Walmart, lots of other bookshops. So, yeah, go and grab these 2 best-selling books now and enjoy. And I'll see you soon on the next video live stream. Happy Asexual Perspectives Awareness Month, sharing and celebrating our diversity across the asexual spectrum and our differences within it. Lots of love to you. Thanks for tuning in. Don't forget to share this video if you think someone can benefit from it. So if someone's going to be thinking about moving in with someone else, it's a good time to share this video. Thanks so much. Subscribe and hit the bell icon so you're never going to miss an episode. Lots of love. Stay ace. Bye.